If there's one thing I learned in life, it's that some truths are too heavy to wear on your sleeve. And mine was a $40,000 a month secret that I never shared with my son. To Marcus, I was just mom, a woman who left early for work, came home tired, reheated whatever was in the fridge, and lived in a modest apartment with furniture older than he was. He never looked at me twice and wondered if perhaps there was more. And I never corrected him. I let him believe I was ordinary, a simple office worker scraping by, someone who lived quietly, kept her head down, and owned nothing worth bragging about. Not because I wanted to hide, but because I wanted him to grow up learning the value of people, not the value of money. I came from a generation where dignity was stitched into your actions, not displayed in your clothes, where silence was a form of protection, not secrecy. So while I oversaw corporate branches across countries, closed million-dollar deals, and made decisions that shaped thousands of lives, I walked home each day carrying groceries in a canvas tote bag, then cooked whatever vegetables were left over. Marcus never knew, and I never offered the truth. What good would it do? Some trophies are best kept in drawers. That Tuesday afternoon, however, everything shifted. Marcus called, his voice tight with something that instantly prickled my instincts. "Mom, I need a favor." My heart dropped a little. He only sounded like that when he was worried or guilty. "Simone's parents are visiting," he continued, "from overseas. They want to meet you. We're having dinner Saturday night. Please come." There was a pause, a long, uncomfortable one, so I asked gently, "Do they know anything about me?" Another silence. Then he admitted reluctantly, "I told them you're simple, that you work in an office, that you live alone, that you, don't have much." Simple. Such a small word. Such a heavy sting. As if my entire life, 40 years of climbing, surviving, enduring could be reduced to a single adjective. But I swallowed the ache and said, "All right, Marcus, I'll be there." When the call ended, I stood in my quiet living room, surrounded by the humble life I had chosen. Worn-out furniture, faded curtains, old TV. Nothing flashy, nothing expensive. And that's when an idea came quietly, like a whisper. If they expected a poor, fragile woman, I would give them exactly that. Not to deceive, not to mock, but to finally see a truth I had long suspected. How do they treat someone who appears to have nothing? Because if there's one thing I know about people, it's this: money doesn't reveal who they are. How they treat those without it does. And I was ready to find out. Saturday arrived with the kind of stillness that warned me something important was about to unfold. Not the dramatic kind, no thunder, no storm, just a quiet certainty that the night wouldn't end the way it began. I opened my wardrobe and picked the outfit that would complete the illusion. A faded gray dress with a shapeless cut, old shoes whose soles had thinned from years of walking, no earrings, no necklace, no watch. I tied my hair back into a careless ponytail and stared at the reflection before me. I looked like a woman life had quietly pushed around. The kind people overlook. The kind people underestimate. Perfect. I stepped out, hailed a taxi, and gave the driver the address Marcus had sent. It was the kind of restaurant where money wasn't just spent, it was flaunted. The kind where even the menus silently judged you. As the taxi drove through the city, I felt two things rising in me. Anticipation, because I knew something was coming, and sadness, because part of me hoped I was wrong about them. The car stopped in front of towering glass doors and warm golden lights. A doorman in white gloves opened my door. I thanked him softly and stepped inside. And there they were. Marcus stood near a long table by the window, handsome in his dark suit, but clearly nervous, shifting his weight as his eyes darted toward the entrance. Beside him was Simone, my daughter-in-law, elegant, as always, in a cream dress with gold details. Her beauty was perfect, but her expression tight, like she was bracing for something. Then I saw her parents. They sat upright, regal and polished, as if carved from luxury itself. Veronica, with her emerald dress sparkling under the lights, and her hair pulled into a sleek bun, wore the kind of cold elegance that intimidated without saying a word. Franklin, in a flawless gray suit, stared at his watch as if time belonged to him. When they saw me approaching, a flicker passed across their faces, fast but unmistakable. Disappointment. Marcus swallowed hard. "Mom, you made it." "Of course, sweetheart," I said with a shy smile, staying in character. Simone kissed my cheek, a gesture so quick and mechanical it could have been rehearsed. Her tone was polite. Her eyes weren't. "Mother-in-law, I'm glad you could come." She wasn't. Not even a little. Veronica extended her hand without standing, her fingers cold and limp, her gaze traveling from my dress to my shoes with the precision of a scanner. "A pleasure," she said. Her voice didn't match the words. Franklin offered a practiced smile, the kind people use when they want to appear kind without actually feeling it. I sat at the far end of the table, the seat no one offered, but everyone silently expected me to take. Not a single hand reached to help pull out my chair. Not a single word about whether I was comfortable. The waiter arrived with menus so heavy they felt like stones, written in French, Italian, and prices invisible to all but those who already knew them. I opened mine and pretended to struggle. Veronica watched like a hawk. "Do you need help with that?" she asked, sweetness stretched thin over condescension. "Oh, yes, please," I whispered. She ordered something simple for me, something appropriate. The word appropriate landed like an insult wrapped in silk. Then the performance began. They talked about their flights, their five-star hotel, their luxury rental car, their shopping trips. Each story came decorated with numbers, prices, brands, figures. Every sentence aimed directly at me, waiting for awe or envy. I gave them neither, just soft nods, kind smiles, and silence. Then Veronica leaned forward with her perfectly poised elegance. So, what exactly do you do, dear? My hands folded on my lap. I work in an office, mostly paperwork, nothing special. Her smile tightened, her eyes sparkled with victory. Ah, administrative work, she repeated loudly, as if announcing it to the room. Well, it's honest work, and that's what matters, right? Franklin hummed in agreement. I took a small sip of water. The cold slide of it matched the atmosphere around me. The food arrived, art on plates. Veronica's dish, $80 steak. Mine, the cheapest thing she could find. She made sure to say it out loud. Throughout the meal, the judgments continued, subtle stabs hidden under polite smiles. Living alone at your age must be hard, Veronica said. Does your salary cover all your needs? Franklin added. Marcus has so many responsibilities, Veronica sighed. It would be unfortunate if he had burdens. Burdens. They meant me, the poor mother, the woman who wasn't good enough for her son's world. I kept smiling, small, timid, humble, but inside me, something cold settled. Not anger, not fury, just certainty. They were exactly who I feared they were, and they had no idea who I really was. Not yet, but they were about to learn. By the time dessert arrived, tiny artistic bites, with prices big enough to choke on the atmosphere at the table had changed. Not for them, for me. Their voices blended into one steady stream of judgment. How much things cost, how much they earned, how much they had done for Marcus and Simone, how little I had. To them, I wasn't a person. I was a financial inconvenience. That's when Veronica gently placed her fork down, folded her manicured hands, and said, I think it's time we talk like family. Marcus stiffened beside her. His jaw tightened, and I could tell he already wanted to stop whatever was coming next. Veronica ignored him. She turned to me with a pitying smile that barely hid her arrogance. Ara, dear Marcus, is entering a new chapter in life. Marriage, responsibilities, building stability. I'm sure you understand. I nodded softly, keeping my expressions small and harmless. Of course. Yes, she continued, leaning in as if sharing a compassion-filled secret. And we all know, well, life can be difficult when someone your age is living alone on a limited salary. There it was, not even subtle anymore. A low blow disguised as concern. Marcus opened his mouth to protest, but Franklin raised a hand, silencing him. My son's shoulders fell. Veronica kept going. Marcus worries about you, she said. He feels obligated to look after you. And Ara, we don't want that burden falling on him. It could affect their marriage. Burden. They kept using that word like it defined me. I let silence stretch long enough to make everyone uncomfortable. Then I whispered gently, I understand. Veronica's smile brightened, relieved, triumphant. In that case, she continued, Franklin and I have discussed something. We'd like to help you financially. I raised my eyebrows slightly, playing the role perfectly. Help me. Yes, Franklin said smoothly, intertwining his fingers on the table. We can offer you a small monthly allowance, just enough so you live comfortably without depending on Marcus. I felt Marcus freeze beside Simone. Even Simone's eyes widened not in shock, but in shame. And in exchange, I asked quietly. Veronica blinked, as if surprised I could even form that question. Well, she said softly, nothing much. We just ask that you give Marcus and Simone space. Don't rely on them so much. Don't interrupt their life. Let them build their household without feeling obligated to you. My son slammed his fist on the table. Mom, don't say a word. You don't need this. Marcus, Franklin snapped. Enough. Simone's head dropped, her face pale. She knew exactly how ugly this sounded, but she said nothing. Veronica kept her eyes fixed on me, waiting for my gratitude, for my acceptance, for my surrender. I folded my napkin slowly, put it beside my plate, and looked up. My timid voice vanished. In its place came a calm, controlled, icy tone they had never heard from me. That's a very generous offer, I said. Truly. Veronica's smile returned, polished and confident. But then I leaned slightly forward and asked, just so we're clear, how much is my absence worth to you? Her smile faltered. Well, we thought, perhaps, somewhere between $500 and $700 a month. My eyebrows lifted. So for $700, I said softly, you want me to disappear from my son's life? Her lips parted. That's not what we said. It's exactly what you meant. Franklin shifted in his chair, uneasy. I didn't stop. I looked at them both with calm precision. Tell me, how much did you give Marcus and Simone for their house? Veronica straightened her back, happy to brag again. 40,000. Ah, I nodded. And their honeymoon? 15,000, she replied without hesitation. 3 weeks in Europe. Very high end. So, I said, you've invested about $55,000 in your daughter's marriage. Veronica lifted her chin proudly. When you love your children, you give them the best. Yes, I said, locking eyes with her. When you love your children, you don't hold back. Then my voice hardened. But tell me something. Did that money buy you respect? Did it buy their loyalty? Did it buy you class? A quiet gasp escaped Simone. Marcus froze. Veronica blinked, stunned. Excuse me. I set my hands on the table. Steady, grounded, unshakable. You spent the entire night measuring my worth by my dress, by my shoes, by the numbers in my wallet. But the only thing you revealed is how small you truly are. Franklin leaned forward sharply. That's enough. No, I said calmly, not yet. And then quietly, deliberately, I told them the truth they never saw coming. I earn $40,000 a month. The entire table froze. Utter silence swallowed the room. I continued, I am the regional operations director for a multinational firm. I oversee 5 countries. I manage hundreds of millions in annual budgets. I sign contracts your lawyers couldn't decipher. Veronica's face lost all its color. Her eyes widened, her lips trembling. Franklin stared as if I had spoken another language. Simone covered her mouth with both hands. Marcus looked at me with tears forming in his eyes, and I finally sat in my truth, calmly, elegantly, without raising my voice. The poor woman they judged was wealthier than all of them, and the silence that followed was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. The silence at that table was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It wasn't the peaceful kind. It was the kind that comes right before a storm breaks everything open. Veronica's lips parted first. "You what?" she whispered, as if each word was heavy enough to bruise her tongue. "I earn $40,000 a month," I repeated gently. "Sometimes more, depending on quarterly bonuses." Simone inhaled sharply, a soft gasp escaping her. Marcus stared at me, wide-eyed, wounded, relieved, confused all at once. But Franklin, he leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowed, studying me the way a man studies an opponent he underestimated. "You're telling us," he said slowly, "that you've been earning that kind of money and living like this." He gestured vaguely toward my plain dress, my outdated shoes, my modest demeanor. "Yes," I answered simply. "But why?" Veronica asked, her voice cracking. I watched her carefully. Beneath her shock was something uglier, humiliation. I finally sat back, spine straight, voice calm, but no longer small. "I chose a simple life," I said, "not because I had to, because I preferred it. My work demands my energy, not my furniture. I don't need a mansion to feel secure. I don't need diamonds to feel valuable." Veronica swallowed hard, her eyes glistening, though not with empathy. It was the sting of pride collapsing. "But you let us believe," she began slowly. I held her gaze. "No, you wanted to believe." Her face crumpled slightly. "I never told you I was poor," I continued. "I never claimed to be anything. You created a story based on what you saw and what you wanted to see." Simone's voice entered softly, trembling. Mom, I didn't know." I turned to her and smiled gently. "I don't blame you, dear. You're young. But your parents, they're old enough to know better." Veronica flinched. Franklin finally exhaled, long, heavy, frustrated. "So all this, your outfit, your behavior, was intentional?" "A test," I nodded. "Yes." He shook his head slowly, a bitter laugh escaping him. "And we failed." "Spectacularly," I said with a calm smile. Marcus suddenly stood and came to my side, placing a trembling hand on my shoulder. "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" I softened, my voice lowered. "Because I wanted you to grow into a man who values people, not money. I wanted you to choose your path without my influence. And Marcus, you did. That's why I'm proud of you." His eyes filled with tears. "I'm proud of you too," he whispered. Veronica couldn't take it anymore. Her voice sharpened, breaking through the quiet. "Why come tonight like this? Why dress like that? Why humiliate us?" I met her gaze steadily. "Humiliation only happens when truth exposes something you tried to hide." Her chin trembled. "You judged me," I continued. "You decided I was unworthy. You tried to buy my absence with pocket change. You called me a burden." Veronica's eyes dropped. And now, I said gently, you're embarrassed not because you hurt me, but because you were wrong. Franklin muttered under his breath, "This is unbelievable." I looked at him. "What's unbelievable," I said, "is that you thought wealth makes someone valuable. You thought I had nothing, so you gave me nothing, not respect, not kindness, not dignity. And now that you know what I have," I added softly, "you want to change how you treat me." Veronica shook her head, denial clinging to her like armor. "That's not true." "It is," I cut in quietly. "You saw a woman with outdated shoes and assumed her worth." Simone covered her face, mortified. Marcus spoke, anger rising in him for the first time that night. "You don't talk to my mother like that. Ever." His voice cracked the air like lightning. Veronica stared at him, stunned by her own daughter's silence and her son-in-law's fury. And that's when I decided to deliver the truth they needed most. "I didn't come here to impress you," I said. "I came to understand you, to know if my son is marrying into a family built on character or on ego." I let the pause settle. "And now I know." Veronica's breath hitched. Franklin looked away. Simone whispered, "Mom, Dad, please stop." But the damage was done, and the truth sat heavily between us. I placed my napkin on the table, stood slowly, and said, "I don't need your money. I don't need your approval, and I will never be a burden to my son." My eyes softened. "But I will also never let anyone treat me like I am less than them." Then I stepped back from the table, quiet, composed, dignified. The poor woman they underestimated had become the storm they never expected. I turned to leave, expecting only silence behind me. But the moment I took a step, Marcus rushed to my side. "I'm going with you," he said firmly. Simone stood too, her face pale but determined. I'm going as well." Veronica's head snapped toward her daughter. "Simone, sit down. We're not finished." But Simone didn't move. For the first time that night, she looked at her parents not as a child afraid to disappoint them, but as a woman realizing who they were. "No, Mom," Simone said softly. "You are." That single sentence hit the table like a stone dropped into still water. Franklin stood abruptly, voice sharp. "You will not walk out with her just because she—" Simone cut him off, her voice trembling but clear. "Dad, she's right. Every word she said is right." Tears slid down her cheeks as she continued. "You treat people based on what they have, not who they are. And tonight, you proved it." Veronica looked wounded, almost betrayed. "Simone," she whispered, "we did this for you, for your future." "No," Simone said, "you did it for your ego." Franklin slammed his hand against the table. "This is ridiculous. You're taking her side. A woman who lied. She didn't lie," Marcus snapped. "You never bothered to ask." Franklin's mouth opened, then slowly shut. He had no argument left. Simone's voice softened. "Marcus and I deserve a marriage built on respect, and I won't be part of a world where my mother-in-law is treated like she's invisible." Veronica's mascara-lined eyes glistened. "So you're choosing them over your own parents?" Simone wiped a tear away. "I'm choosing what's right." Those words, I could see them carve something deep into Veronica's pride. The restaurant seemed to shrink around us. Every table felt silent, every eye subtly watching. But none of that mattered. I looked at Simone, this young woman who had been raised in privilege, sheltered, adored, and shaped by her parents. Yet in this moment, she stood on her own. I reached out gently and touched her hand. "Thank you," I whispered. She choked back a sob. "I'm sorry for what they said. I'm so sorry." "You didn't say it," I replied. "And tonight, you showed me who you truly are." Marcus placed an arm around Simone, steadying her as she trembled. We turned to leave together, three people walking away from a table built on entitlement. Three people choosing dignity over wealth, truth over appearances, respect over status. But before we reached the exit, Veronica stood abruptly. Her chair screeched across the floor. "Ara," her voice echoed, sharp and desperate. I turned slowly. She looked smaller now, no longer the elegant woman holding court at the head of her table, just a mother whose world was slipping through her fingers. She swallowed. Her facade cracked. She hesitated. "I didn't know." I held her gaze. "You didn't want to know." Her lower lip quivered. Franklin placed a hand on her shoulder, but she shrugged it off. "Ara," she tried again, voice softer, breaking. "Let's talk about this." I shook my head gently. "Tonight wasn't about money," I said. "It was about character." Tears welled in her eyes, real ones this time. Simone stepped closer, her voice trembling with conflicted love. "Mom, we'll talk later. But right now, I'm going with them." Veronica opened her mouth, closed it, then lowered herself into her chair, as if the weight of the truth finally settled on her. Franklin sat too rigid, jaw tight, refusing to look at any of us. We left the restaurant quietly. No shouting, no scenes, just a quiet, cold parting. And yet, the moment we stepped outside, the night air felt lighter, like the world had shifted just enough for all of us to breathe again. Simone wiped her cheeks and exhaled shakily. "I can't believe they did that," she whispered. Marcus hugged her closer. "I'm sorry you had to see it." She shook her head. "No, I needed to." I placed a hand on both of their arms. "Tonight wasn't meant to break anything," I said softly. "It was meant to reveal." And reveal it did, every flaw, every truth, every intention. But it also revealed something else: strength, unity, a future that didn't depend on money, but on the people standing beside me now. The three of us walked toward the parking lot together, and for the first time that night, I felt completely at peace. The car ride afterward was quiet, but in a peaceful, settling way. Marcus drove with one hand on the wheel and the other gently holding Simone's hand. She leaned into him, still shaken, still processing, but somehow steadier than before. I sat in the back seat, staring out the window at the passing city lights. For years, those lights had witnessed my long nights, my early mornings, my silent sacrifices. Tonight, they felt like witnesses to something else entirely: freedom. When we pulled up outside my apartment building, Marcus immediately got out and opened my door. You don't have to walk me in, I smiled. He shook his head stubbornly. Yes, I do. Simone stepped out too, wiping the last traces of tears from her cheeks. As we reached my door, Marcus finally asked the question that had been burning in him the entire night. Mom, why didn't you ever tell me the truth about your life? I could have helped you. I could have done more. I touched his cheek gently. Sweetheart, I never wanted you to feel like you needed to take care of me. I wanted you to grow into a man who does good because of who he is, not because of what he thinks I lack. He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. But I feel like I failed you tonight. I shook my head. No, Marcus, you stood up for me. You stood up for what's right. That's not failing. That's being a man. He looked relieved and proud. Simone stepped forward, her voice small. Ara, I want to say something. Her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. I'm sorry, not just for tonight, but for every time I saw you as just Marcus's mother. I didn't take the time to know you, to understand you. I should have defended you sooner. I placed my hand over hers. Simone, you defended me tonight in the most important way, by choosing integrity over comfort. Tears welled in her eyes again. I don't want to be like them, she whispered. I don't want our future to be built on money or pride or arrogance. I want to build a home where people matter. I smiled softly. Then you're already different. Marcus wrapped an arm around her, relief visibly washing over him. For a moment, the three of us stood there, united in a quiet strength, one that hadn't existed before tonight. Then Simone asked the question I didn't expect. Ara, would you teach me about life, about how you built yourself, about everything you know? Her request hit me like a warm wave, unexpected and deeply touching. I nodded slowly. I would love to. Simone let out a shaky breath, almost a laugh, as if a weight had slid off her shoulders. We hugged soft, warm, real. Not because of obligation, not because of roles, but because something genuine had formed tonight, a bond born from truth. After they left, I stepped inside my apartment. The same little space, the same old furniture, the same quiet, but it felt different now. The world outside finally knew my truth, and the part of me that had stayed hidden for so long finally felt seen. I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the night fade into the first hints of dawn. Tonight, I didn't feel like the director of a major corporation. I didn't feel like a woman who had just confronted arrogance and shattered it with nothing but calm truth. Tonight, I just felt like a mother who finally reclaimed her dignity, a mother who had shown her son and her future daughter-in-law that true power doesn't need to be announced. It simply exists, quiet, steady, unshakable, and for the first time in many years, I allowed myself to rest. The next morning felt strangely calm. I woke earlier than usual, made myself a simple breakfast, and opened the curtains to let the golden sunlight spill into the room. For the first time in a long while, there was no heaviness on my chest. no secret weighing down my shoulders, no fear of being misunderstood. I had spoken my truth, and the world hadn't ended. Instead, something had begun. I was sipping my tea when my phone vibrated. I expected it to be Marcus, checking in, making sure I slept well. But it wasn't him. It was Veronica. My heart didn't race. I didn't panic. I simply looked at the name on the screen and inhaled deeply. I could have ignored it. But a woman only grows by facing things head on. I answered. Her voice was nothing like the one I heard last night. No sharpness, no arrogance, no smooth confidence. She sounded small. Ara, she said quietly, do you have a moment? I didn't respond immediately. She took that silence as a permission to continue. I didn't sleep last night, she whispered. I kept thinking about everything you said, everything I said, everything I implied. She exhaled shakily. I behaved horribly. I know that. I stayed quiet, letting her speak. I was raised to believe stability comes from security, she continued, and security comes from money. My whole life, I measured worth in numbers. Not because I wanted to hurt people, but because it was all I ever knew. Her voice cracked, but last night, when Simone walked away from me, choosing dignity over the comfort I tried to give her, I realized how wrong I've been. There was a long pause, one filled with sincerity, guilt, and something else I never expected from her, humility. I judged you, she whispered, not because of who you are, but because of the image in my head. I created a story about you before even giving you a chance. She drew in a trembling breath. Ara, I'm calling to apologize. I closed my eyes, not because I needed time to answer, but because hearing those words from a woman like Veronica meant something unexpected. Growth, humanity, a crack in the armor she had worn for so long. Thank you for saying that, I said softly. She swallowed audibly. I don't expect forgiveness, and I don't expect you to forget what happened. But her voice trembled again. I want my daughter to have a peaceful life, and she can't have that if we're at war with her husband's mother. I smiled slightly. Veronica, I have no intention of being at war with anyone. She let out a shaky breath of relief. I'd like to meet again, she offered. Just the two of us. No tension, no expectations, no judgments. Her tone held something I couldn't ignore. Hope. I thought for a moment. Last night had exposed many truths, not just about her, but about me too. Maybe this wasn't just an apology. Maybe it was a beginning. I agree, I said calmly. Let's meet. Veronica inhaled sharply, almost as if she didn't believe her own courage. Thank you, she whispered. And Ara, yes, I'd like to meet you as who you really are, not the woman I mistook you for. Something inside me softened, not forgiveness, not yet, but a quiet shift. Then I'll meet you as myself, I said gently. We set a time. We set a place. And when I hung up, I felt something unexpected. Not victory, not pride, just peace. Healing doesn't always come from silence. Sometimes it comes from broken voices trying to rebuild. The phone rang again. This time it was Marcus. "Mom," he said immediately. "Simone told me her mom wants to meet you. Are you okay with that?" I smiled. "Yes," I said. "It's time." He let out a relieved exhale. "I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart." After the call ended, I stood by the window again. The day felt brighter. The air felt lighter. And the future didn't seem as tangled as it had last night. A storm had passed, but in its wake, something surprising had begun to grow. Respect, change, perhaps even understanding. And maybe, just maybe, there was room for something else too. A second chance. The cafe Veronica chose was small, quiet, and tucked away. Nothing like the extravagant places she was usually drawn to. That alone told me something had shifted. When I arrived, she was already seated near the window, her posture straight, but her eyes softer than I had ever seen them. No designer handbag resting like a trophy. No jewelry sparkling like a declaration. Just a woman stripped of armor. When she saw me, she stood up immediately. "Ara," she said gently. "Veronica," I replied with a calm smile. We sat. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't heavy. It was cautious, careful, like two people figuring out how to meet in the middle. She was the one who finally broke it. "I owe you more than an apology," she said, her voice steady but fragile. "I owe you the truth." I folded my hands in my lap, giving her space to speak. Veronica inhaled deeply. "I didn't dislike you," she admitted. "I feared you. That surprised me." She continued quietly. "When Simone told us Marcus's mother lived alone, worked in a small office job, didn't have much, I panicked. I kept thinking my daughter would end up carrying someone else's burden for the rest of her life. I told myself I was protecting her." Her hands trembled slightly. "But that wasn't the truth," she said. "The truth is I cared too much about what other people would think." I stayed silent, letting her unravel the knots she had tied herself into. "I didn't want my friends to judge us," she confessed. "I didn't want them asking why Simone married into a family that didn't match ours financially. I thought, if I pushed you away and controlled the narrative, everything would look perfect." She swallowed hard. "But last night, when you spoke, when you revealed who you really are, I realized something horrifying." Tears welled in her eyes. I wasn't protecting my daughter's future. I was protecting my pride. A long breath escaped her, heavy and regretful. "I hurt you. I insulted you. I diminished your entire life to a few assumptions and prejudices, and you responded with more grace than I deserved." She looked at me directly. "Ara, I am ashamed." I leaned back gently. "Veronica," I said softly, "shame is only useful if it teaches us something." A tear slid down her cheek. "It has," she whispered. We sat in silence for a moment, letting the truth settle. Then I spoke. "You know," I began, "money can buy comfort, luxury, convenience, but not character. You assumed I had nothing because I didn't display it. But the truth is, I spent my whole life working quietly, building myself without needing applause. Veronica nodded slowly. You're stronger than I ever realized. I offered her a small smile. And you're braver than you think for being here, talking about this. Her lips quivered. I never wanted Simone to live the way I did, she said. Always trying to meet someone else's expectations. Always fearing judgment. I don't want her children, she paused, realizing the weight of her own words. To grow up in a home where love is measured in dollars. My heart softened. Then show her something different, I said gently. Show her that change is possible. Veronica wiped her eyes, nodding slowly. I want that, I truly do. She hesitated. May I ask you something? Of course, her voice lowered. Why did you test us? Why not just tell us who you really were from the start? I took a moment before answering. Because, I said softly, people reveal themselves most honestly when they think no one is watching. Her breath caught. And what did you see? She whispered. I answered truthfully. At first, pride, fear, judgment. She looked down. But now, she asked quietly. I reached across the table and gently touched her hand. Now, I see a woman trying. That's all any of us can do. Veronica covered her mouth with her free hand, absorbing the kindness she didn't think she deserved. Ara, she said shakily, I can't promise I'll change overnight, but I want to try. That's enough, I whispered. She exhaled, trembling with relief. I'd like us to start over, she said. Not as enemies, but as family. I smiled. We can. A wave of warmth washed through her expression. She wasn't the cold, polished woman from the restaurant anymore. She wasn't the judgmental mother who measured me with her eyes. She was just a mother afraid, learning, growing, and for the first time, I saw a future where we didn't tear each other down, but built something new. Not because we had to, but because we chose to. The following weekend, Marcus and Simone invited both families for a small dinner at their home. Nothing fancy. Just a quiet evening meant to reset everything. Veronica and I had already taken the first step. But this dinner would show whether that fragile bridge we built could hold the weight of reality. When I arrived, Simone greeted me with a warm hug that felt far more genuine than any embrace we'd shared before. I'm really happy you're here, she said softly. I'm happy to be here, I replied. The house smelled like roasted chicken and fresh herbs. Simone had clearly been cooking all day. Marcus joined us with a bright smile and a quick kiss on his wife's forehead. But what caught my attention was Veronica, standing by the dining table, arranging plates with a nervousness she didn't bother to hide. Her hair was tied back softly. No dramatic makeup, no glittering jewelry, just simplicity, intentional simplicity. She turned when she heard us, offering a small, hesitant smile. Ara, she said, you look lovely. The compliment surprised me not because of the words, but because this time her eyes matched them. Thank you, I said gently. So do you. Simone and Marcus exchanged a glance, both relieved, both hopeful. We settled around the table. A warm candle flickered at the center, casting a calm glow. Simone insisted on serving everyone, while Marcus poured drinks. For a while, conversation flowed easily, nothing heavy, nothing complicated. But the real test came halfway through the meal. Veronica cleared her throat and looked at me across the table. "I want to say something," she began. Marcus's fork froze midair. Simone immediately reached for her mother's hand, bracing herself, but Veronica squeezed her daughter's fingers gently and continued. "I know I've apologized to Ara privately," she said, "but the things I said that night affected all of us, so I want to say this in front of my daughter and my son-in-law." The room went still. My heart beat once, deep and slow. Veronica looked directly at Marcus, her voice tight with emotion. "I misjudged your mother. I misjudged who she is, what she stands for, and what she means to you." Marcus blinked, stunned. "I acted out of fear," she admitted, "and out of pride. And I forgot something important. Simone didn't choose you for your status. She chose you because you're a good man, a kind man, a man who loves her deeply." Simone wiped her eyes slowly. "And Ara," Veronica continued, turning her gaze to me, "you raised that kind of man, the kind I want my daughter to walk through life with. I'm grateful for that." Emotion swelled quietly in my chest. Not vindication, not triumph, just softness. She wasn't performing. This wasn't for show. This was a woman swallowing stones to build something better. Marcus cleared his throat. "Veronica, thank you," he said quietly. Franklin, who had been unusually silent all evening, finally spoke. "I also owe you an apology," he said gruffly, avoiding my eyes. His pride still fought him, but his conscience was winning. I let my assumptions lead my behavior. It was wrong. I nodded politely. "Thank you for saying that." Simone sighed with relief, her whole body relaxing as if a weight had been lifted. The tension slowly dissolved into laughter, small jokes, gentle exchanges. There was no pretending, no showing off, no false warmth, just people trying again. After dinner, Simone brought out a tray of tea and dessert. Veronica helped clear the plates, something I never thought I'd see. When we finally sat in the living room, she looked at me again. "Ara, I hope one day we can be friends," she said softly. I smiled. "One day," I said, "we might be even more than that." Her eyes softened. A mother-in-law and a mother-in-law, not rivals, not competitors, not two women guarding their corners, but two pillars of the same future family. Later that evening, as I prepared to leave, Simone hugged me tightly. "You changed everything," she whispered. "You opened our eyes." I held her close. "No," I whispered back. "Life opened them. I only pointed to the truth." Marcus walked me to the door, his voice warm with gratitude. "You didn't just protect yourself, Mom. You protected us." I brushed his cheek lightly. "That's what mothers do." As I walked to my car, the night felt different, lighter, softer, and full of possibilities I never imagined. A family had broken. A family had healed. A family had been rebuilt, this time on the right foundation. Respect, honesty, growth, and the understanding that sometimes Life doesn't ask us to choose sides. Sometimes it asks us to chain. Weeks passed, and the changes were subtle at first, small shifts, quiet gestures, gentle steps toward a new beginning. But slowly, something extraordinary began to take shape. Veronica began calling, not to pry, not to judge, but simply to talk. A recipe she wanted to share, a question about Simone's favorite childhood dish, a warm check-in asking how my week was going. Her voice no longer held the clipped sharpness of superiority. It carried something softer, curiosity, mixed with genuine effort. Franklin took longer, of course. He wasn't a man who apologized easily, nor one who changed quickly, but little things told me he was trying. He shook my hand longer than usual when we met. He asked about my work, not out of performance, but because he wanted to understand. And though he rarely said much, the stiffness he once wore like armor slowly began to loosen. Simone blossomed, freed from the suffocating expectations of perfection. She laughed more, smiled more, loved more openly. She came to me often, sometimes with questions, sometimes for stories, sometimes just to sit in silence and sip tea. One afternoon, she said something that lodged itself in my heart. "You're teaching me how to be strong, quietly strong. I never had that before." Marcus thrived. He carried himself differently now, more confident, more assured. A man who no longer had to choose between the woman who raised him and the woman he loved. He had both, harmoniously. And me, I found myself letting go of a layer of solitude I didn't realize I'd built around my life. I had always been independent, proudly so. But independence didn't have to mean emotional isolation. This family, our family, was slowly weaving itself into something whole, something real. One evening, everything came full circle. Simone invited us for dinner again, this time a celebration of sorts. The table was set beautifully, but simply. Candles flickered softly. A warm aroma filled the room. Veronica and Franklin arrived with flowers, not expensive, dramatic bouquets, just simple, heartfelt ones. I brought dessert. When we sat down, the atmosphere felt entirely different from the night at the restaurant. Light, warm, comfortable. In the middle of the meal, Veronica cleared her throat. But this time, there was no fear, no pride, just sincerity. "Ara," she began gently, "I want you to know I'm grateful for you." I paused, touched by the honesty in her tone. She smiled softly. "You taught me something I never learned, that character isn't worn, it's lived." Franklin nodded, a quiet confirmation. Simone's eyes glistened with emotion, and Marcus reached over the table to squeeze my hand. "Ara," Veronica continued, "I hope you know that you are not just Marcus's mother. You are part of our family too. Fully, always." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened and warmth rose behind my eyes. This was the moment I didn't realize I had been waiting for. Not validation, not recognition, not an apology, belonging. I placed my hand over hers and said simply, "I'm glad we found our way to each other." Simone leaned her head against Marcus's shoulder. Franklin lifted his glass. To new beginnings. We all raised our glasses, but I knew it wasn't just a toast. It was a promise. A promise that families aren't born perfect, they're shaped, broken, tested, mended, and sometimes reborn. Later that night, when I returned home, I stood by my window again, sipping tea and watching the night sky. But this time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full, full of growth, full of peace, full of a family that had once been fractured, but now stood on ground stronger than wealth could ever buy. The storm had passed. The wounds had healed, and a new chapter, one built on understanding, honesty, and grace, had truly begun.